The ripping sound cut through the cafeteria like a knife through silence. 200 pairs of eyes turned to stare as Sarah Thompson stood frozen in the center of Westfield High's massive lunchroom, her torn uniform hanging off her shoulder. The fabric had split from collar to waist, exposing the tank top underneath. Camera phones appeared like weapons, each one aimed at her humiliation. "Oops," Tyler Morrison said, his quarterback hands still gripping the ruined fabric. "Guess I don't know my own strength." His laugh boomed across the room, deep and cruel. The fluorescent lights above cast harsh shadows on his face, making his smile look like a predator's grin. Sarah's hands moved to cover herself, but the damage was done. The Snapchat story was already uploading. The Instagram post was already typed. In 30 seconds, everyone at Westfield High would see her standing there, destroyed. But Sarah didn't cry. Not one tear. She kept her breathing steady, just like her grandfather taught her during their morning physical therapy sessions. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Stay calm when the world is chaos. "What's wrong?" Tyler stepped closer, his 6'3" frame towering over her 5'4". "Cat got your tongue? Or are you finally learning your place?" The cafeteria held its breath. Forks stopped moving. Conversation died. Even the lunch ladies behind the serving counter had stopped scooping mashed potatoes to watch. If you're feeling that rush of what's going to happen next, hit that like button. It really helps more people discover these stories. And if you want to share where you're watching from, drop it in the comments below. For those who want to support more stories like this one, there's a thanks button right under this video. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps me bring you more inspiring tales of courage and standing up for what's right. Thank you for being here. Now, let's see what happens when push comes to shove. Sarah's brown eyes met Tyler's blue ones. For 3 months, she had taken his abuse in silence. 3 months of pushed books, blocked lockers, deleted homework files. 3 months of being Westfield High's favorite target. But something was different today. Something in the way her hands weren't shaking anymore. "My place," Sarah repeated, her voice quiet but clear, "is wherever I choose to stand." Tyler's jaw tightened. Nobody talked back to him. Nobody challenged the star quarterback whose father donated $50,000 to the athletic program last year. Definitely not some honor student whose mom worked double shifts at Dallas Memorial Hospital. "Run along to the bathroom," he said, waving his hand like he was dismissing a servant. "Before I decide to finish the job," Sarah gathered her books from the floor where they had scattered. Each movement was deliberate, controlled. She could feel the weight of every stare, hear the click of every camera, but she had survived worse. She had watched her grandfather struggle to walk after his Parkinson's diagnosis. She had held her mother's hand through 16-hour shifts and unpaid bills. A torn uniform was just fabric. As she walked toward the exit, someone started a slow clap, then another. Soon, half the cafeteria was applauding Tyler's cruelty. The sound followed her down the hallway like thunder. But Sarah had counted the faces. She had seen Madison Hayes, her only friend, sitting frozen at their usual table. She had noticed Mrs. Rodriguez, the new vice principal from Houston, standing in the doorway with her phone out. Not everyone was clapping. The bathroom door swung shut behind her, cutting off the noise. Sarah leaned against the sink and finally let herself feel the weight of what just happened. Her reflection stared back from the mirror-torn uniform. Messy black hair, brown skin flushed with humiliation but not defeat. 3 months ago, it had started so small. Sarah had been standing at her locker, organizing her chemistry notes for MrKreidwise.com. Johnson's honors class. The hallway buzzed with typical Monday morning energy. Couples kissed goodbye before first period. The debate team argued about tournament prep. Everything felt normal until a shadow fell across her locker. "You're Sarah, right?" Tyler Morrison stood there with 2 of his football teammates, Kyle Brennan and Brandon Walsh. Even at 8 in the morning, Tyler looked like he had stepped out of a sports magazine. Perfect blonde hair. Perfect smile. Perfect everything. "Yes," Sarah had answered, not understanding why Westfield's golden boy was talking to her. You're the girl who keeps ruining the curve in Johnson's class. Sarah closed her locker carefully. I just study hard. Study hard. Tyler repeated, his voice mocking her slight Texas drawl. That's cute. You know what's not cute? Making the rest of us look bad. Kyle laughed. A sharp sound like breaking glass. Maybe she could tutor you. Ty, help you get that D up to a C. Tyler's face darkened. I don't need help from anyone, especially not from some nobody who thinks she's special because she can memorize a textbook. The bell rang, saving Sarah from having to respond. She had hurried to class, thinking it was just a bad morning. Athletes didn't like being shown up academically. It would blow over. It didn't blow over. The next day, her books mysteriously fell out of her arms in the hallway. The day after that, someone had jammed gum in her locker. By the end of the week, Tyler's crew had established a routine. They would wait for her at strategic points outside the library, near the science labs, by the bus stop, never touching, just intimidating, making sure she knew they were watching. Why don't you tell someone? Madison had whispered during lunch one day. Glancing nervously at Tyler's table across the cafeteria, Sarah had shaken her head. Tell them what? That Tyler Morrison doesn't like me? His father practically owns this school. Besides, my mom can't afford for me to have problems. We need my scholarship applications to be perfect. Madison had bitten her lip, her red hair falling across her face. They had been friends since middle school, back when being smart wasn't a social death sentence. But high school had different rules, and Madison was already on thin ice for associating with Sarah. The harassment escalated gradually, like a pot slowly coming to boil. Tyler learned Sarah's schedule, her habits, her weaknesses. He discovered she ate lunch in the same spot every day. He found out she stayed after school for chemistry tutoring. He mapped her routines and inserted himself into them like a virus. Week 3 brought the first physical contact. Sarah had been walking to PE when Tyler shoulder-checked her into a row of lockers. The impact knocked the wind out of her lungs and left a bruise on her ribs that lasted 2 weeks. Watch where you're going, Tyler had said loudly. Playing victim. Some people are so clumsy. Coach Williams had been standing 10 feet away. He had seen everything. But when Sarah met his eyes, he just turned and walked into his office. The message was clear. Tyler Morrison was untouchable. That night, Sarah had helped her grandfather with his physical therapy exercises. His hands shook as he gripped the parallel bars, but his voice remained steady. You're tense today. Maya, he said, using the Spanish endearment even though they weren't Hispanic. It was something he had picked up during his years in Texas. Your shoulders are up by your ears. Sarah had forced herself to relax. Just school stuff. Grandpa. He had studied her with eyes that had seen war in Korea, that had witnessed enough violence to recognize its aftermath. School stuff that left a bruise on your ribs? Sarah's hand had moved unconsciously to her side. How did you? You're favoring your left side, protecting something that hurts. He had lowered himself carefully into his wheelchair. Who did it? It doesn't matter. It always matters. His weathered hands had gripped hers. I was small too. You know. In boot camp, the bigger guys thought I was an easy target. One even looked like this boy who's been bothering you. Tall, blonde. Thought the world owed him everything. Sarah had frozen. How do you know about... I'm old, not blind. I see you practicing those knee strikes with more force lately. I hear you coming home later because you're taking different routes. I know fear when I see it. Maya. And I know anger. They had sat in silence for a moment. The only sound, the ticking of the old clock on the wall. What did you do? Sarah had finally asked. In boot camp? Her grandfather had smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. I learned that bullies understand one language. Consequences. Not violence for violence's sake, but the knowledge that their actions have prices. Sometimes that price is pain. He had wheeled himself closer. These exercises we do, they're not just for my Parkinson's. Every knee strike, Every defensive position muscle memory works both ways. You're learning to help me, but you're also learning to help yourself. When the time comes, and it will come, your body will remember. That conversation had echoed in Sarah's mind as the weeks passed, and Tyler's campaign intensified. By month 2, he had recruited more followers. The basketball team joined in after Tyler spread rumors about Sarah cheating on tests. The cheerleaders started accidentally spilling drinks near her table. Even kids who didn't know her began avoiding her. Not wanting to risk Tyler's wrath by association, the isolation was almost worse than the physical intimidation. Madison still sat with her at lunch, but their conversations had become strained. Other students looked through Sarah like she was invisible. Teachers who once praised her work now seemed hesitant to call on her in class, afraid of making her more of a target. Sarah threw herself into her studies with desperate intensity. If she couldn't have friends, she would have perfect grades. If she couldn't have peace, she would have academic achievements that no amount of bullying could erase. She won the regional science fair with a project on chemical compounds in cancer treatment. Inspired by watching her mother work with patients, she placed first in the state chemistry Olympiad. She tutored struggling students for free, building a resume that would get her out of Westfield and into a college where Tyler Morrison's shadow couldn't reach. But Tyler couldn't stand being outshone. The more Sarah achieved, the more vicious he became. He started an Instagram account called Westfield's Biggest Loser, featuring creep shots of Sarah studying, eating alone, walking to class. The posts got hundreds of likes from students too cowardly to bully her directly but happy to participate digitally. The breaking point had come 2 weeks ago. Sarah had been called to the principal's office to receive her regional science fair trophy. She had walked in to find Tyler already there, playing his favorite role, the concerned student. "I'm just worried about her," Tyler was saying to Principal Hawkins. "She seems really isolated. Maybe she's putting too much pressure on herself with all these academic competitions. It's not healthy." Principal Hawkins, a man who cared more about football championships than science fairs, had nodded thoughtfully. "Tyler raises some good points. Sarah, perhaps you should consider scaling back your extracurriculars. Focus on being more social." Sarah had stood there, trophy in hand, understanding flooding through her. Tyler wasn't content with making her miserable. He wanted to take away the one thing she had left, her achievements. "I'm fine," she had said carefully. "My grades are perfect, and I enjoy the competitions." Tyler had leaned forward, concern painted on his face like a mask. "But at what cost? I've seen you eating alone, walking the halls by yourself. That's not normal for a teenager. Maybe if you spent less time studying and more time making friends." "Like you?" Sarah had interrupted, her patience finally fraying. "Should I follow you around and laugh at your jokes? Would that make me normal enough?" The mask had slipped for just a second, revealing the cruel smirk underneath. But Principal Hawkins had only seen Sarah's outburst. "There's no need for that tone. Miss Thompson, Tyler is trying to help. Perhaps you should appreciate that more." Sarah had left the office with her trophy and a warning about her attitude. That night, she had found the trophy smashed in the parking lot, the pieces arranged to spell out "loser." Tyler had posted a video of himself breaking it, claiming he had found it that way. Such a shame. He had captioned it, "All that work for nothing." The video had gotten 10,000 views in an hour. Sarah had gathered the pieces and thrown them away without crying. But something inside her had hardened that day, crystallizing like the chemical compounds she studied. She understood now that Tyler wouldn't stop until he had completely destroyed her. He fed on her misery like a parasite, growing stronger with each humiliation. Yesterday had been the worst yet. Tyler's girlfriend, Jessica Chen, had dumped him very publicly in the cafeteria. She was headed to University of Texas next year, and apparently didn't want to be tied down to a high school boyfriend. The entire school had witnessed Tyler's humiliation as Jessica announced that she needed someone more mature. Maybe someone who reads books without pictures. Tyler had laughed it off. But Sarah had seen the rage building behind his eyes. He needed someone to blame. someone to punish for his embarrassment. And Sarah had walked into the cafeteria today knowing she was the most likely target. She just hadn't expected him to go so far. Now, standing in the bathroom with her ruined uniform, Sarah made a decision. She pulled out her phone and opened the group chat Madison had secretly created for kids who had been bullied by Tyler over the years. There were 14 members, all too scared to speak publicly but united in their shared trauma. He ripped my uniform in front of everyone. She typed, "I'm done being silent." The responses came immediately. He shoved me down the stairs sophomore year. Coach Williams saw and did nothing. He spread rumors about me that weren't true. Lost all my friends. His dad threatened my family when we tried to report it. Sarah looked at the messages pouring in. Testimony after testimony of Tyler's reign of terror. She screenshotted everything and opened a new email to Mrs. Rodriguez, attaching the evidence. "This has been going on for years," she wrote, "not just to me. Please help us." She hit send before she could change her mind. A knock on the bathroom door made her jump. "Sarah?" Madison's voice was barely a whisper. "Are you okay?" Sarah opened the door to find her friend holding a Westfield High hoodie. "I grabbed this from Lost and found," Madison said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry I didn't do anything. I was just so scared." "I know," Sarah said, taking the hoodie gratefully. "I was scared too, but I'm not anymore." As she pulled the hoodie over her torn uniform, Sarah's phone buzzed. Mrs. Rodriguez had already responded, "Come to my office immediately. Bring anyone else who wants to share their story. It's time this ended." Sarah looked at Madison. "Will you come with me?" Madison wiped her eyes and nodded. "I should have done this months ago. We all should have." They walked out of the bathroom together, no longer alone. In the hallway, other students noticed them. Some whispered, some pointed, but a few fell into step behind them. Marcus Webb, who Tyler had tormented for being in theater. Ashley Park, whose eating disorder had worsened after Tyler's constant comments about her weight. James Sullivan, who had transferred to private school to escape the bullying, but came back because his family couldn't afford it. By the time they reached Mrs. Rodriguez's office, there were 12 students in the group. Each one had a story. Each one had evidence. Tyler Morrison was still in the cafeteria, surrounded by his crew, laughing about his latest victory. He had no idea that in a small office on the second floor, his empire was beginning to crumble. Sarah sat in the chair across from Mrs. Rodriguez, her grandfather's words echoing in her mind. Bullies understand one language: consequences. The reckoning was coming. But first, she had to get through tomorrow, because if Sarah knew anything about Tyler Morrison, it was that he didn't handle threats to his power well. And once he found out about this meeting, once he realized his victims were finally fighting back, he would escalate beyond anything he had done before. The torn uniform had been a declaration of war. Tomorrow, Tyler would want to finish what he started. Sarah touched the hoodie covering her ruined shirt and made herself a promise. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it in silence. The time for being Westfield High's perfect victim was over. Mrs. Rodriguez leaned forward, her expression serious but kind. "Sarah, what you've done today by speaking up took incredible courage, but I need you to understand something. Once I start this investigation, once I bring in the other administrators and potentially the police, there's no going back. Tyler's family has resources. They'll fight this. Are you prepared for that?" Sarah thought about her mother, working another double shift to pay for Sarah's SAT prep. She thought about her grandfather, fighting Parkinson's with every breath, but never complaining. She thought about all the lunches eaten alone, all the hallways navigated in fear, all the achievements that felt hollow because she had no one to celebrate with. "I'm prepared," she said. "We all are." Mrs. Rodriguez nodded and picked up her phone. "Then let's begin. I'm calling an emergency administrative meeting for tonight. I want every incident documented, every witness statement recorded. And Sarah?" She paused, meeting Sarah's eyes. You might want to warn your mother. Tomorrow is going to be difficult." As Sarah left the office with her fellow survivors, she pulled out her phone to text her mom. But before she could type anything, a new Snapchat notification appeared. Tyler had posted a video from the cafeteria, her humiliation on repeat with laughing emojis overlaid. The caption read, "This is what happens when losers forget their place. See you tomorrow. Sarah Thompson." Sarah deleted the app without watching. She had more important things to do than feed Tyler's ego. But as she walked toward the bus stop, she couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would bring something worse than torn clothes and public humiliation. Tyler Morrison had built his kingdom on fear and silence. Now both were crumbling, and everyone knew what happened to tyrants when their subjects finally revolted. They fought back with everything they had. In the living room, her grandfather was already in his wheelchair, dressed and ready for their morning routine. His hands shook more than usual, but his eyes were sharp. "You didn't sleep," he said. "It wasn't a question. Neither did you," Sarah replied, helping him to the parallel bars. They went through their exercises in silence at first. Knie rises, leg extensions, balance work. But when they got to the defensive movements, her grandfather grabbed her wrist. "Show me the knee strike again," he said. Sarah demonstrated, her form perfect from months of repetition. Knee up, hip forward, core tight. The movement was encoded in her muscle memory now, as natural as breathing. "Again," her grandfather said. "But this time, imagine you mean it?" Sarah repeated the strike with more force. The air whistled past her knee. "Better." He studied her face. "You know what's coming today." "Yes. And you know you can't start it." "I know. But if he touches you, I'll end it." Sarah finished. Her grandfather nodded slowly. "I was in a foxhole once. Outside Seoul. Winter of 1952. 3 of us trapped. Enemy advancing. The biggest guy in our unit. Thompson, his name was. Funny coincidence. He panicked. Started crying about dying. You know who saved us?" Sarah shook her head. "Kim. Smallest guy in the company. Maybe 5'5", 130 pounds, soaking wet. But when those soldiers came over the ridge, Kim didn't hesitate. 3 perfect shots. Center mass. Dropped them before Thompson even raised his rifle. He gripped Sarah's hands. Size is hardware, Maya. But will? Will is software. And software wins wars. They finished their exercises in companionable silence. As Sarah helped him back into his wheelchair, he pressed something into her hand. His old dog tags from Korea. "For luck," he said, "and to remember you're not alone. You never wear." Sarah slipped the tags under her shirt, the metal cold against her skin. She kissed her grandfather's forehead and headed upstairs to get ready for school. She chose her clothes carefully. Jeans, sturdy ones, sneakers with good grip, a fitted t-shirt that wouldn't give anyone anything to grab. Her hair went into a tight bun, secured with multiple elastic bands. No jewelry except the hidden dog tags, nothing that could be used against her. The text came while she was brushing her teeth. "Don't come to school today. Unknown number." Sarah deleted it. Another. "This is your last warning." Delete. A third. "You'll regret this." Sarah turned off her phone. She had made her choice. The bus ride to school felt longer than usual. Other students kept glancing at her, whispering behind their hands. Someone had screenshotted Tyler's video and made it into a meme. Sarah Thompson, Westfield's biggest loser. Now in HD humiliation. Madison was waiting at the bus stop, flanked by Marcus Webb and Ashley Park. "We're walking in with you," Madison said, her chin raised in defiance. "All of us who went to Mrs. Rodriguez yesterday. Safety in numbers." By the time they reached the main entrance, their group had grown to 15. Word had spread overnight. The silent victims weren't silent anymore. Tyler was already there, holding court by the flagpole with his usual crew. Kyle Brennan cracked his knuckles. Brandon Walsh bounced on his toes like a boxer. They had come prepared for war. Look who showed up. Tyler called out, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Thought you might have transferred overnight. Would have saved everyone some trouble. Sarah kept walking. Hair group tight around her. Don't engage. Get inside. Mrs. Rodriguez had promised increased security today. But Tyler stepped into their path. Where you going? We're not done talking. Move, Madison said, surprising everyone with her boldness. Or we'll got. You'll what? Tyler laughed. Tell teacher? Run to the new VP? You think that changes anything? My dad owns half this town. You're all just temporary inconveniences. The crowd was growing. Students sensed blood in the water. That primitive high school instinct for drama. Phones came out. The modern Coliseum was ready for its gladiators. I heard you had a little meeting yesterday. Tyler continued. His eyes locked on Sarah. Telling stories. Making accusations. That was stupid. Sarah. Really stupid. Sarah finally spoke. Her voice calm. The truth isn't an accusation. Tyler's jaw twitched. The truth! The truth is you're a nobody who got too comfortable. The truth is you need to learn your place. I know my place. Sarah said. It's right here. In this school, whether you like it or not. The crowd murmured. Nobody talked to Tyler Morrison like that. Tyler stepped closer. Sarah could smell his cologne. Something expensive and sharp. You made me look weak yesterday. In front of everyone. No, Sarah said. You did that yourself. The punch came fast, but not from Tyler. Kyle Brennan, eager to prove his loyalty, swung first, his fist aimed for Sarah's face. Time slowed. Muscle memory activated. Sarah ducked left. The punch whistling past her ear. Kyle stumbled forward. Off balance. She could have struck then. But she held back. Don't start it. Only finish it. Tyler grabbed her arm. Hold still. That was the mistake. The moment he touched her, everything her grandfather had taught her crystallized into action. Sarah pivoted on her left foot, using Tyler's grip against him. Her right knee came up hard and fast, driving into his ribs with months of practice behind it. The impact was perfectly her weight, all her momentum. Focused on a single point, the crack was audible across the courtyard. Tyler dropped like his strings had been cut. He hit the ground gasping, clutching his side. His face went from red to white to an alarming shade of gray. She broke his ribs! Someone screamed. Call 911! Did you see that? She went full ninja. Sarah stood over Tyler's writhing form, her breath steady. Around her, chaos erupted. Kyle and Brandon backed away, suddenly unsure without their leader. The crowd pressed closer, everyone trying to get a better view. I didn't start this, Sarah said loudly, clearly, making sure the cameras caught every word. But I'm done being your victim. We all are. Tyler tried to speak, but only managed a wheeze. His perfect face was twisted in pain, tears streaming down his cheeks. The golden boy of Westfield High, reduced to crying on concrete. The ambulance arrived in 6 minutes. The police in 8. Sarah stood exactly where she was, hands visible, making no sudden movements. She had nothing to hide. She attacked my son! Mr. Morrison had arrived, his face purple with rage. He looked like an older version of Tyler, same height, same arrogance, same assumption that money meant immunity. I want her arrested, expelled. I'll sue this school into bankruptcy. Officer Martinez, a veteran who had seen plenty of high school fights, looked unimpressed. Sir, we need to interview witnesses first. Witnesses? Half the school saw her assault him. That's interesting. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared, tablet in hand. Because I have something else half the school needs to see. She connected her tablet to the courtyard's outdoor display screen, usually reserved for pep rally announcements. The security footage began to play, not just from today, from 3 months ago. The crowd watched in silence as the footage showed. Tyler shoving Sarah into lockers while Coach Williams watched. Tyler and his crew surrounding her in empty hallways. Tyler destroying her science fair trophy. Tyler ripping her uniform yesterday. Timestamp after timestamp. Incident after incident. 3 months of systematic bullying, all caught on camera. I've been compiling this since yesterday. Mrs. Rodriguez announced 47 documented incidents. Would you like to see them all? Mr. Morrison, I'm sure the police would be interested. The crowd's mood shifted. Whispers turned to anger, not at Sarah, but at Tyler. How many of them had suffered in silence? How many had been too scared to speak up? She still attacked him. Mr. Morrison sputtered. That's assault. Self-defense. Officer Martinez corrected. Clear as day. He grabbed her first. She responded with proportional force. Proportional? She broke his ribs. After 3 months of assault and battery from your son, Mrs. Rodriguez said coolly, which you enabled by threatening any family that tried to report him? Oh yes. I have documentation of that too. Would you like me to share it? Mr. Morrison's face went from purple to white. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. Tyler was loaded onto a stretcher, still gasping. As they wheeled him past, he looked at Sarah with something like disbelief. In his world, the victims didn't fight back. The weak stayed weak. The powerful stayed powerful. But worlds can change in a single moment. Miss Thompson, Principal Hawkins had arrived, looking deeply uncomfortable. I think we need to. What we need, Mrs. Rodriguez interrupted, is a complete review of how this school handles bullying, starting with why Coach Williams ignored 47 incidents. She turned to the crowd. Anyone else who has experienced bullying from Tyler Morrison or his crew. My office is open all day. No retaliation, no judgment, just truth. The exodus was immediate. Dozens of students began walking toward the building, not just Tyler's recent victims, but kids from years past, the quarterback who quit the team after hazing, the cheerleader who transferred after rumors destroyed her reputation, the freshman who still ate lunch in the bathroom. Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. Officer Martinez smiled kindly. You okay? Kid? Yes, sir. Good defensive form. Military family? My grandfather. Korean War. He nodded approvingly. Tell him he taught you well. You need anything, you call. He handed her a card. Sometimes doing the right thing is hard, but it's always worth it. As the police car pulled away with Mr. Morrison screaming about lawsuits, Sarah realized the courtyard had gone quiet. Students were looking at her differently now, not with pity or fear, but with something else. Respect. Sarah! Madison crashed into her with a hug. That was incredible. You were like something out of an action movie. I just defended myself, Sarah said, uncomfortable with the attention. No, Marcus Webb said, stepping forward. You defended all of us. You showed us it was possible to fight back. More students approached, not to gawk or gossip, but to say thank you, to share their own stories, to ask if she was okay. For the first time in 3 months, Sarah didn't eat lunch alone. The aftermath came in waves. First, the medical report. 2 broken ribs, bruised lung. Tyler would be out for 6 weeks. Minimum, his football season was over. His scholarship prospects, already shaky due to poor grades, evaporated completely. Second, the investigation. Mrs. Rodriguez's evidence was damning. 47 incidents became 73. As more students came forward, Coach Williams was placed on administrative leave pending termination. 3 other teachers were reprimanded for failure to report. Third, the legal threats. Mr. Morrison hired 3 law firms. All 3 dropped the case after reviewing the evidence. Turns out, documented patterns of assault don't play well in court, especially when the victim is a straight-A student with no prior incidents. Fourth, the expulsions. Tyler Morrison, permanently expelled. Keela Brennan, expelled. Brandon Walsh, expelled. 6 other students suspended for varying lengths. Fifth, the changes. Westfield High implemented a zero-tolerance bullying policy with actual teeth. Security cameras were upgraded. An anonymous reporting system was established. Peer counselors were trained. Sarah was asked to be one of the first counselors. "I don't know if I'm qualified," she told Mrs. Rodriguez a week later. They were sitting in the VP's office, the same place where everything had started to change. "You stood up to 3 months of torture," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "You found the courage to speak truth. You showed others they could do the same. I'd say you're uniquely qualified." Sarah accepted. Her first day, she found herself sitting across from a nervous freshman named David Chen. He was small for his age, Asian, and wore thick glasses. An easy target. "They keep taking my lunch money," David whispered, saying I'm too rich to need it anyway. "Who's they?" Sarah asked gently. "Some sophomores. They're not as bad as Tyler was." But bullying is bullying," Sarah finished. "And you deserve to feel safe at school? Let's talk about what we can do." They worked out a plan. Report to administration. Change routes between classes. Build a support network. And if necessary, defend himself. "But I don't know how to fight," David said. Sarah smiled. "Fighting isn't always physical. Sometimes it's just refusing to be silent. But if you want, I know someone who gives excellent self-defense lessons. My grandfather. He taught me everything I know." David's eyes widened. "The knee strike? He taught you that?" "Among other things, but more importantly, he taught me that strength isn't about size. It's about knowing your worth and protecting it." Word spread. Soon, Sarah was counseling 5 students a week, then 10, then 20. Kids who had been suffering in silence finally had someone who understood, someone who had been there and survived. Tyler's former crew scattered. Without their leader, they were just scared kids who had chosen the wrong side. Some transferred schools, others kept their heads down, trying to blend into the background they had once terrorized. Sarah saw Tyler only once more. 3 months later, at a gas station, he was pumping gas into a used Honda, his ribs probably still aching. He saw her and froze. They stared at each other across the pumps. The golden boy who had fallen and the girl who had knocked him down. Tyler opened his mouth, closed it, then got in his car and drove away without a word. Sarah heard later that he was working at his father's company. Starting at the bottom, his dreams of college football were over. His reign of terror, a cautionary tale whispered in hallways. Sarah filled her own tank and headed home to help her grandfather with his exercises. "You're smiling," he observed, as she helped him stretch. "Good day?" "I counseled 15 students today," Sarah said. 3 of them want to join our self-defense class on Saturday." Her grandfather beamed. The classes had been his idea. Held in their garage with donated mats. Free for any student who needed to feel safer. "And how do you feel?" he asked. "About everything that's happened?" Sarah considered. The viral video of her defending herself had finally died down. The college acceptance letters were starting to arrive, full rides to universities that valued courage as much as chemistry grades. Her mother had been promoted to head nurse. Partly because the hospital administrators had been impressed by Sarah's story. "I feel free," Sarah said finally. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I can take up space without apologizing for it." Her grandfather squeezed her hand with his trembling fingers. "That's all I ever wanted for you, Maya, to know your worth and never let anyone make you small." That Saturday, their garage was full. 15 students. All sizes, all backgrounds, all united by a common thread. They refused to be victims anymore. Sarah stood at the front, demonstrating proper stance. "Remember, we're not learning to hurt people. We're learning to protect ourselves, to create boundaries, to say no more and mean it." She caught Madison's eye in the front row. Her best friend had signed up for every class, determined to never freeze again when someone needed help. "The first lesson isn't a punch or a kick," Sarah continued. "It's this. You have the right to exist. You have the right to be safe. And anyone who tries to take that from you needs to understand there will be consequences." The students nodded, absorbing the words like plants drinking water after a drought. "Now," Sarah said, smiling. Let's learn how to make sure they understand, starting with the basic knee strike. Grandfather, would you demonstrate? Her grandfather wheeled himself forward, his hands shaking but his spirit unbreakable. At 73 years old, fighting Parkinson's every day, he was still the strongest person Sarah knew, not with violence, but with courage, not with cruelty, but with conviction. The war against bullying at Westfield High wasn't over. It would take years to fully change the culture, to root out every trace of the poison Tyler Morrison had spread. But it had begun, and sometimes, that's all it takes. One person standing up, one voice saying no more. One moment of perfect clarity when the victim becomes the victor. Sarah Thompson had been broken down to nothing. But from that nothing, she had built something unbreakable. And that was the greatest victory of all. The self-defense classes grew beyond what anyone could have imagined. What started in a garage with donated mats became a movement that spread through the entire district. Other schools heard about the girl who stood up to Tyler Morrison and wanted to learn from her. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the Westfield High auditorium, now transformed into a training space for a special Saturday session. 200 students from 5 different schools filled the room. Local news cameras rolled in the back, documenting what they called the Thompson effect. Fear is a liar, Sarah told the crowd, her voice steady and clear. It tells you that you're weak, that you're alone, that speaking up will only make things worse. But look around this room. Look at all these faces. You are not alone. You never were. Her grandfather sat in the front row, his tremors worse now, but his pride unmistakable. Beside him, Sarah's mother wiped tears from her eyes. She had taken the day off her first in months to watch her daughter transform pain into purpose. After the session, a girl approached Sarah. She couldn't have been more than 14, all knees and elbows, reminding Sarah of herself at that age. "My name's Emma," the girl said quietly. "There's this group of seniors at my school. They wait for me every morning by the bike racks. They haven't hurt me yet. But the threat is there." Sarah finished. "The fear is real even if the bruises aren't visible yet." Emma nodded, tears threatening to spill. "My dad says to ignore them, that they'll get bored and move on. But it's been 2 months. And it's getting worse." Sarah knelt down to Emma's eye level. "Ignoring bullies doesn't make them go away. It makes them escalate. Your dad means well, but he's wrong. You have the right to feel safe at your school." She spent the next hour with Emma, developing a plan. Document everything. Report to administrators with specific incidents and dates. Build a support network of trusted friends. And yes, learn to defend herself, if necessary. "But what if they retaliate?" Emma asked. "What if reporting them makes it worse?" Sarah thought about Tyler Morrison, about those 3 months of escalating torture. They might, but staying silent guarantees it will continue. And once you speak up, you'd be amazed how many others find their voices too. As Emma left with her parents, looking stronger already, Madison appeared at Sarah's elbow. "You know, Tyler's dad is trying to get the school board to shut down our program?" Sarah wasn't surprised. Mr. Morrison had been waging a quiet war ever since his son's expulsion, using his money and influence to try to paint Sarah as the aggressor. But the evidence was too strong. The witnesses too many. "Let him try," Sarah said. "We have something more powerful than his money." "What's that?" "Truth." And 200 students who refused to be silenced anymore. The program continued to grow. Sarah developed a curriculum with Mrs. Rodriguez's help. Combining physical self-defense with emotional resilience training, they brought in counselors to talk about trauma, police officers to explain legal rights, and survivors from all walks of life to share their stories. Sarah received acceptance letters from MIT, Stanford, and Johns Hopkins. She chose Hopkins for their medical program. Inspired by her mother's work and her grandfather's battle with Parkinson's, she wanted to heal people, to understand the chemistry of courage and the biology of resilience. On her last day at Westfield High, Sarah cleaned out her locker one final time. No gum in the lock, no threatening notes, No shadow of Tyler Morrison lurking nearby. Just a normal teenager preparing for the next chapter. And Tyler Morrison? He became a footnote in Westfield High's history, a cautionary tale about what happens when power meets resistance, when cruelty meets courage, when a bully meets someone who simply refuses to break. The applause was thunderous. Sarah walked to the podium, her cap and gown pristine, her grandfather's dog tags hidden beneath her collar. In the audience, she spotted familiar faces. Emma, now confident and surrounded by friends. David Chen, who had just won the State Math Olympiad. Dozens of students who had found their voices in her self-defense classes 4 years ago. Sarah begun, her voice carrying to the back rows. I learned that silence is not safety, it's surrender. The gymnasium fell quiet. Even the restless younger siblings stopped fidgeting. We're taught from childhood to avoid conflict, to turn the other cheek, to kill bullies with kindness. But what happens when kindness is seen as weakness? What happens when turning the other cheek just gives them a better target? She paused, finding her mother's eyes in the crowd. Her mother, who had worked 18-hour shifts but never missed a self-defense class. Her mother, who had testified at the school board when Mr. Tuhaileke.com stay. Morrison tried to shut down their program. Tyler Morrison taught me something valuable, Sarah continued, and a ripple of surprise went through the crowd. He taught me that systemic cruelty requires systematic resistance. That one voice alone can be silenced. But a chorus becomes impossible to ignore. She gestured to the students wearing purple ribbons, the symbol their anti-bullying coalition had adopted. There were hundreds of them, scattered throughout the gymnasium like stars in a dark sky. To those still suffering in silence, you are not weak for being targeted. You are not responsible for someone else's cruelty. And you are not alone. There are people in this room right now who understand your fear because they've lived it, who know your pain because they've felt it, who will stand with you because someone once stood with them. Her voice grew stronger, filled with the conviction that only comes from survived trauma, transformed into purpose. We cannot wait for heroes to save us. We must become our own heroes. We cannot depend on systems that failed us. We must create better systems. We cannot let fear dictate our limits. We must let courage define our horizon. The timer on the podium showed 30 seconds left. Sarah straightened her shoulders, the same shoulders that had once hunched in hallways, trying to become invisible. Class of 2025. We have a choice. We can perpetuate cycles of cruelty, or we can break them. We can be bystanders to injustice, or we can be upstanders for change. We can let our wounds define us, or we can let our healing inspire others. She lifted her tassel, ready for the traditional flip. I choose healing. I choose courage. I choose to use my voice for those who haven't found theirs yet. And I challenge each of you to do the same. The gymnasium erupted. Standing ovation. Tears. Cheers. And somewhere in that crowd, Sarah knew there was a frightened freshman who needed to hear those words, who would remember them when the hallways felt too long and the bullies too powerful. Her speech was over, but her mission was just beginning.